I've got 3 goals today. First goal is for you to get to know me better. Second goal is for you to get to know the charter school movement better. And third goal is for you to get to specifically know Yes Prep Public Schools better. So first goal, get to know me better. This is a picture of a guy named Luis De Leon, who is a 7th year teacher at Yes Prep Public Schools. I didn't actually get to know Luis at Yes Prep. I got to know him when I was his 5th grade teacher in HISD when I was a core member. But a little bit about Luis before I tell about being his teacher. So last year, Luis gave the commencement address for his students because they specifically asked him to give the commencement address because he started teaching them when they were 6th graders. And this is a line from his address to them. A teacher is not a teacher without students. You played a vital role in the creation of Mr. De Leon. Without you, there would be no me as a teacher. My whole identity as a teacher rests on the fact that you were my first class. I became a teacher with you. So I sat there listening to him share this with tears rolling down my face because I actually was Luis's teacher in my very first year as a teacher in 1999. So there's Luis. There's me. This kid Jonathan, I got a call from his mom for putting him on the scary ride at Disneyland. And at some point in the future, I can answer questions about how we sold 20,000 hot dogs to get our students, all of them, to a trip to Disneyland in our first year as teachers. I share that because it's important for me, for you to know that I'm in this work for generational impact. The goal for me is not to do the work for the short term, it's to do it for the long term. I got into the work to serve Luis, but I stay in the work to watch how Luis serves his students and how his students will serve their students. So I think about this work as long run, long haul work. That's who I am. So then the next question is, if that's who I am, who's the charter movement? What are we all about? And I understand that we have a broad range of sort of understanding in the room. So we have the Yes Prep board chair, who probably could recite all of these by heart. And we also have people who are sort of learning about charter schools in real time. So I'm going to quickly go through some myths about charter schools, but also talk about how Yes Prep is currently working to debunk those myths. So first one I hear a lot is that charter schools are not public schools. Charter schools are public schools in every sense of the word. So one fact is that 96.7, almost 97% of Yes Prep's budget comes directly from state and federal funds. In fact, if we weren't growing, we wouldn't have a need for fundraising at this point. We use fundraising to help our growth and to ensure that we can continue to stay strong as we grow. Next is that charter schools are held to the same financial and student achievement accountability standards as any other public school in the state of Texas. In fact, some would argue with the 3 strikes you're out system that charter schools are under, that we're held to an even higher standard. Next, charter schools don't serve children with special needs. 6% of our 13,000 kids at Yes Prep are special needs students, and we voluntarily hold ourselves to the same code of conduct as any school in the state of Texas. We have the right as a charter school to hold ourselves to our own student code of conduct. This year we actually turned over that right to the state so that we can open our own alternative school that we just opened this past August. So kids that get expelled from Yes Prep go to our restorative school instead of going back into the district. Next myth. Charter schools cherry pick the best students. Truth is, we look at 3 pieces of information when students apply to us. Their name, their address, so we can figure out what school they should go to, and the grade that they're in. Not their grades, the grade that they're in, so we can make sure that they go to the right grade. Another fact is my daughter is currently a 6th grader in HISD. She got waitlisted at Yes Prep. So it is truly an open enrollment blind lottery. Now, the other story behind this is if I'd happened to have gotten her in during the right window, then she would have had preference as a Yes Prep employee, but I missed the window, and my wife has not let me live this down for missing the window in our own application process. Finally, charter schools steal funds and students from traditional districts. So there's this myth out there that somehow students are owned by where they happen to be born, right? So if you're born in 77008, that zip code owns where you go to school. At Yes Prep, we believe that families and students are not owned by anyone. They get to make the choice, the same choices that we would want to make for our own kids. And so we don't refer to kids as our kids. They are kids who have chosen us. And the language that we use at Yes Prep is once they choose us, we never unchoose them. So this is a transformation in the charter movement that you just kick out kids that don't do what you ask them to do. Once a kid chooses us, we never unchoose them. So those are some myths and facts about about charter schools broadly. Before I get into the specifics of Yes Prep, I wanted to pause if there are any questions about charter schools broadly. Yeah.
Mark, you haven't mentioned that charter schools have to find the funds for their own facilities.
Yeah, so one of the things about charter schools is that we get money from the state, but there's a gap in how much we get to build buildings. This past year, or actually 2 years ago in the legislative cycle, we got some facility funding, about $200 per kid. There's still about an $800 gap per kid that we have to privately fundraise if we want to open a new building. Great point. Any other questions specifically about charter schools? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious, so like, for the point where you said that Yes Prep holds itself to the same disciplinary code, so how many of these points that are true of Yes Prep are universally true, and how many of them are sort of voluntary? Or is this a representation of every charter school?
Great question. So let's go one by one. The top one is true for all charter schools. The vast majority of charter schools in the state, the vast majority of their money is public funds. Same with second point. This next one, this fact is true about all charter schools. All charter schools, at least the ones that I work with, serve special ed students in Texas. This one here about disciplinary code, that is specific to Yes Prep, but all charter schools have to have a state-approved code of conduct. So even if they're not using the same code as traditional districts, they all have to have a state-approved code. And then all the rest are also true for all charter schools. Great question. I just wanted to take it out of the realm of just talking broadly about charters and make it specific to Yes. But great question. Any other questions about charter schools before I move on to specifically talk about Yes? Okay. So here's who we are specifically at Yes Prep. Our mission is that we will increase the number of children from underserved communities who graduate from college prepared to lead. So our goal is not just to get students college ready, but to ensure that they're graduating from college. Right now, our college graduation rates, our 6-year college graduation rates, are just under 50%, which is 5 times the national average for kids from the target demographic that we serve, but not close to where we want it, which is 80%, to mirror the upper quartile, economic quartile of kids across our country. So in one sense, we're doing really, really well, and in another sense, depending on who you compare us to, we have a lot of work to do. That's our mission. Our vision is that every student in Houston will have equitable access. And so Yes Prep is very committed to partnerships with other organizations. We actually don't think there's a scenario where we do this by ourselves. 100 years from now, if we're in this alone, there will still be a gap in Houston, and so we specifically work in partnership with Spring Branch ISD, in partnership with Aldine ISD, actually run schools in those districts. We live by our core values. I'm not going to go through each one, but I would say one that's important to point out is that we exist to eliminate educational inequity. This is a value that we believe deeply in. It's not just about the values that get us up every day to go to work, but the values that should exist in our city where there is not a gap where kids go to school depending on where they happen to be born. And then a quick overview of who we are as an organization. I'm not going to go through this line by line because you'll get this when we email it out later, but this is a snapshot of who we are as an organization. And then this year we adopted something called our core model, and I'm going to quickly walk through our results from last year, anchoring them in the components of our core model. So results from 17-18. First, our Harvey response. We raised $4.3 million worth of Harvey funds that went directly back to the students and families that were impacted most. And then we opened what's called the Thrive School, which is that alternative school, that restorative school that I mentioned earlier, where kids can go who need special behavioral interventions. That opened this August. So 2 things that we're very proud of in terms of educational equity from last year. Next, results from last year. According to the Houston Chronicle, Yes Prep dominated, I love that term, we dominated the U.S. News and World Report rankings. And all of our eligible high schools actually received a gold medal from U.S. News and World Report for those rankings. One that's important to point out, Yes Prep North Forest, those of you who understand the history of Houston, North Forest was reconstituted by the state and given to HISD. Gosh, it's probably over a decade now that happened. And it went from being the lowest performing school system in the state of Texas to now the highest performing Yes school on this measure. It turns out kids aren't the problem, right? It's not the kids that need to change, it's the adults and the adult mindsets that need to change. And then, next result, our average daily attendance last year with Harvey, with the flu epidemic, with 2 ice storms was 96.3%. Yes Prep students showed up last year, and they do this historically, showing up every year. And then finally, going back to Luis at the beginning, there are 70 plus Yes Prep alum who currently work at Yes Prep. So our goal is to get them to come back and serve at Yes Prep. And here's Luis with some of the members of the Yes Prep family. All right, so quickly, where we're headed. That's where we've been this past year. Here's where we're going. So this is one of our new strategic priorities, educational equity, is that we'll ensure that every child in Houston has greater access to a rigorous Yes Prep pre-K through 12th grade education, which means we are now serving 18 campuses and 13,000 kids, but our goal is to grow to have 19 campuses with 8 feeder systems with capacity to serve more than 20,000 kids over the next 5 years. So the growth that we will see at Yes Prep moving forward into the next 5 years is going to be almost entirely by adding on feeder patterns for our current schools. So we currently run 612 campuses. This next 5-year period is going to be slow down growth with opening new 6th grade campuses and go back and fill in feeder patterns for our elementary schools. And then the rest of these slides you're going to get when we send the presentation, but what they do is they just show what each of our priorities for the next 5 years are going to be related back to that core model. So a priority around student achievement, a priority around culture and identity. I'll let you read them and then I'm going to keep going so I can leave a few minutes for questions. A priority for talent. And finally, a priority for systems and processes. And then I just put this up as a final slide. This is me again in my first year with Luis in his class.